Well, welcome once again to another edition of the Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. I am, of course, your host, Sonia Barrett, and thank you for joining me on this Monday once again. And as always, wishing you the best that the week has to offer. All right. Well, today, let me start off real quickly. I'm not going to be long winded today, but I just want to read this quote. It's very short. And it's, do you give as much energy to your dreams as you do to your fears? And the author is unknown, but I think this is a really significant one. Do you give as much energy to your dreams as you do to your fears? Lots to think about there. And we've got our guest today, anyways, Dr. Kamau Kokayi, and he's going to obviously correct me if I've just pronounced his name incorrectly. He is the founder of Healing Health Services, and some of you are probably familiar with him because you've heard him on KPFK and also our sister station, WBAI. So today's topic, I believe we're going to be a little bit far and wide, but we're going to be really talking about the role of consciousness and mind in the healing of the body. And obviously, from the perfect person to have this discussion with, although we've had this discussion with so many folks, but everybody has this unique perspective and angle that might be just the stimulating thought that is needed for you specifically at this time. So, Dr. Kamau Kokayi MD is the founder of Healing Health Services and has been in private practice as a primary care holistic medical specialist for over 35 years. He graduated from Yale School of Medicine in 1982, went on to do a residency in family practice with board certification. His additional studies have been in homeopathy, Chinese medicine, applied kinesiology, nutritional medicine, biogeometry, and metaphysics. He just became the post president of the Homeopathic Medical Society for the state of New York, and retired from the New York State Acupuncture Board in 2019. He is continuously exploring intuitive and informational leads in the fields of health and human evolution and assist his clients in achieving optimal health. And there's so much more to this wonderful being that's on the planet that is so expansive. So I'm going to, first of all, just say welcome. Thank you so much for being on the Expansion Zone.
Sonia, you've been very inspiring.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to share. Clearly, everybody has their awakening in different ways. And
Hmm.
um, I guess mine has its own unique stamp, which really comes out of the reality of being an African American in this country, which for me is to say to be an outsider, right? So, and just to frame this, so I was a kid that was bussed in to the all-white high school in, a neighborhood in Long Island, right? Um, I was a kid that went to college and actually became a college scholar there. Um, I had a Nobel Prize laureate, but at the same time, I was deeply involved in the Africana Studies Center. I started a newspaper, Moja Sasa, which ran for several decades after I left. But again, it was a sense of being an outsider. We had a building takeover. There was constant, questions about us, our as a group on campus, and how we were looking at people, how they looked at people of color. And then I actually had a choice between a full scholarship to law school and getting into Harvard and Yale medical schools. And I say that in the context, this was like affirmative action time. That door got quickly shut right behind me.
Oh, I
But
bet.
in finding myself at Yale, again, I was struck with the reality of being an outsider, of like all the black students sitting together at lunch. I mean, it was just, I said, this is weird. So, after different exchanges with professors and students, I said, you know what? Something is fundamentally wrong here. God would not put all the answers here in this kind of institution or in Western medicine, given the nature of the consciousness of the people that have developed this technology, that somehow, despite all this technical wizardry, that they can't really see me as a person that is really equal in any way to them as just another human being, right? That really became clear. So I said there has to be something that's beyond this. So, after threatening my parents that I was going to leave medical school, I went back and I said, you know what? Let me hang in here. And I told them in the middle of my third year, I'm going to leave school for a year. And at the time, I was going to go and practice martial arts because that was one of my passions from college. But what happened? What happened during that time, prior to that year and a half, I started looking into Chinese medicine. I got exposed to homeopathy. I got exposed to African culture. And within that framework, I left Yale in good standing for a year, though everyone thought I was crazy because they didn't know what I was
Mhm.
going to do or trying to achieve. I moved to Harlem, right? I moved across the street from the Rosicrucian Society, where
Love it.
I started taking all kind of classes in metaphysics and actually became a member of something that became the Osero Set Society. And I actually became a priest within that tradition. It became a formalized religious system based on ancient Kemet. And within that context, I worked at a studio in Manhattan called the Shasha House. There was a Dr. Ronald Davison there, and there was a Dr. William Wade, who was an acupuncturist, and he introduced me to acupuncturists, and I was kind of blown away by what I was seeing in terms of the response of people. And then within my African Spiritual Society, the head of it, Ra'un Nefer Amen, he was a really excellent homeopath. And I saw amazing things happen with homeopathy. I said, well, you know what? I can do these things. So literally, this is 1979 to 1980.
Wow.
Right. So
Wow.
at that time, I initiated study in both of these disciplines. And to get out of Yale, I had to write a thesis. So I wrote it on physics and medicine because in order to really understand homeopathy and acupuncture, you had to go beyond a Western chemical model. You had to go beyond that kind of mechanical framework. And at that time, there were all kind of literature that was being published. There was Dancing Wooly Masters,
Right. Which is,
Gary
I read that
Zukov,
book. Hmm.
right? There was the Tao
Hmm.
of Physics by Friedrich
Right.
Kopp. I can't even pronounce his name at this point. But I started reading this stuff, and this became like part of my thesis and really looking at the expansion of what is human, what is reality, and looking at why Western medicine had kind of locked itself down within the biochemical framework, looking at the split between church and state. And I said, well, that's the limitation there because the emphasis on a biochemical, biomechanical reality, right, without really delving into what would be called spirit or things that are beyond the five senses, that was considered the province of the church. And that was like,
Hmm.
so the two really didn't mix. So within that framework, allopathic medicine really gained traction because the classical physics physicists, they began to apply those same laws to the human body. So they began to understand the body in that kind of mechanical fashion. There was Boyle, dealt with oxygen exchange to the lung, Harvey with circulation of blood. You can go on, but it was that both, genius and limitation that was built in. Um, but within that, with the rise to power in terms of Western culture, also came a level of arrogance, right?
Hmm.
So within that, I actually had gotten to the point in terms of my mindset that I said, if I just totally adopt allopathic medicine, that would be accepting all of the other philosophical premises about African people and who we are and what we are, and just all the kind of stereotypes relative to science. So science became the religion. Science just means to know,
Right.
right? And there are clearly other ways of knowing. So I kind of, I would say, refurbished myself through African culture, 16 years of full moon rituals, and just all
That's a
kind
long
of,
time.
right, all kind of other study, divination, um, you know, astrological work. I mean, it goes on and on, along with the Chinese medicine and homeopathy. So I chose to educate myself beyond a typical Western framework. And I kind of brought all of that along with me. And at a certain point, um, I was taking care of some really notable folks at different points. So I was offered the opportunity to receive a grant, and with that, I decided, well, I'm hearing about this medicine from China. There's Ayurvedic medicine, there's shamanic medicine traditions from Southern Hemisphere. But what about traditional African culture? Because what had happened, the first thing that Europeans had to do when they went into Africa is to get rid of the priests and priestesses, because they were the center of the community. They were the bridge between, the realm of the non-physical, the realm of the ancestors and, the inner planes, and how society worked. They helped to keep checks and balances. People kind of think of like Western technology as somehow this extraordinary thing, but it's a natural extension of Western culture, which really focuses on a particular arena of reality in terms of the whole mechanistic biochemical way of looking at things. And what I learned in studying Chinese medicine is the focus was on qi. When you go to the Yale Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, they tell you that qi was never anything that was physical, but it was understood that things that were quote unquote appeared physical to the five senses had their own particular qi. So
Mhm.
everything was imbued with this kind of life energy, whether you're talking about lung qi, kidney qi, food qi.
Life force energy.
It's a life force energy.
Specific to
So
the organ or the whatever that part
that
of the body. Hmm.
that concept of life force energy was left out of mainstream medicine, but
Hmm.
actually found its way in homeopathy, which I have just always found fascinating. A difficult art to practice, but nonetheless, you can get amazing results when you're able to find a particular um, energetic construct from a plant, animal, whatever, that resonates with a problem that a person has. You can bring about amazing healing realities. So,
So let me ask you real quickly. So, with that said, which I absolutely agree with you, that this is a very crucial element. This idea and understanding of chi is so really crucial, whether we call it chi or not. I mean, I think all ancient
chi,
culture,
prana, umbwenge, whatever,
yeah,
whatever you want to
exactly.
call
It just simply
right.
is. And so leaving that out of the I'm going to say the Western medicine model has had great implications because one, children are not we're not educated on this in school. It has removed us from ourselves, from actually being able to what communicate, to listen to the language of the body. uh, I mean, would you say?
So, and just to add to that, there is one other element that's really important here, because I still had to understand what is the contribution of African people
Mm-hmm.
to this overall model, and it really boiled down to the appreciation of consciousness,
Yes.
because within consciousness, the inner planes, I mean, we're talking about all kinds of energetic vortexes, whether you call them deities Obasun. I mean, each culture has their own name. We talk about ancestors, but these are things that are real. And when
Mm-hmm.
I say real, they are things that are perceived, that are communicated with within an actual African cultural system. When people go into trance, which I guess the Western equivalent is like channeling, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when people go into trance in African culture, there's an actual change in brain waves. That there's an actual change in quality of communication, of what actually comes through. And I'm saying this as someone that participated enriched. I have pictures of myself with a cascarilla on me, like in trance. I was in one particular clan, and it was, so you mark time by the lunar cycle, by the
Mm-hmm.
different energetic principles that came into play. So this was all a strong part of that particular cultural system. But what happens is if you try to approach life, if you try to approach setting up government, societal structures, and you're only privy to this biochemical, this kind of intellectual mind, right? You're going to fall short
It's a
because
tiny model. It's
it's a
a
tiny
box.
model. And if you move on that, you create one, you might solve one problem, but then you create another,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes on and it's aggravated by the fact that then you constantly see yourself in competition.
Mm-hmm.
You constantly you're holding on to something that you think is pure about your culture, you know but you're really missing the larger point that there's a human family, and that every culture has something to offer,
I
has a
love that.
cultural technology that
Mm-hmm.
is impressive in
I
its
love it.
own right and needs to be understood in that way.
It's
So
necessary. It's very necessary. Which hence the vastness. Hence your just going out and exploring, like
right.
expanding, like the expansion zone, which is a whole idea. It's being so open, which is what you did. You were so open and not limiting your understanding to just one set of concepts, but you realize that there is so much more, which makes all the difference in the world, because then it just opens you up to more. The more you open up is the more, more you have access to more information.
Right, right. It's a never ending thing. And so people ask me, what's your plan? Well, part of it, and so the meditation that I do, it's funny because I started a meditative forum both first in my office, and then when I moved to California to create my bi-coastal existence, I started doing Zoom meditations, right? And what happened with that is initially it starts off of his mindfulness. That's like the basics to like put your body to the side, put your thoughts and things to the side. But what happened is I started going into trance. I
Mhm.
start like, oh, this is like getting back into my African cultural piece, and then it's a communication that comes through in that way where you're receiving, right? But the receiving is, it's not just God out there. There's all kind of entities and energies, and so inspiration,
It's a
revelations.
vast
uh,
superhighway.
it's a vast super highway. And I'm like, hey, so a waking up is like getting on board. It's like, well, who am I going to meet on the inner planes? Or what messages can I receive? How can I become a better version of myself? So that becomes a conversation, at least for me, in approaching this. And of course, patients or clients that decide to join in, some of them get it that way. Some of them are just deeply relaxed. I mean, most people, when they meditate, maybe, one or two out of 10 meditations, they get some little spark. Other than that, they might just be sitting there trying to fight off thoughts and stuff. But
Now that you said that, all right, so I know what makes the difference, but let's talk about that. What makes the difference between one person who may, really get into a deeper space and one that doesn't? obviously it depends on the person's ability to be flexible or more open. I mean,
Well,
what
I tell
do you
you,
say?
example, I was speaking, so a patient came in yesterday who actually participates in my meditations regularly. And she was looking at some of the stuff that I was doing in the office, which I maybe we'll get to talk about. She said, like, well, how do you do that? I said, well, that's a gift, but at the same time, when I meditate, I'm always asking to receive or a message, you know. She says, well, I'm asking, but I don't get any.
Not getting anything.
I said, well, what are you asking about? Are you asking about material things?
Hmm.
And she said, yes. I said, well, that's not how this works and stuff.
Asking for stuff.
You know so so the questions need to be directed toward how can you serve, how can
Hmm.
you be a better version of yourself, what do you need to clear out the way, what do you need to be aware of to move forward. So you ask the larger questions that really help, to reveal this to you. And I have to give thanks and praises to Michael Beckwith, because when I started doing work at Agape, it was really nice to see that direct connection, as
Hmm.
opposed to there's this deity that you have to deal with, or you have to go
Right, right.
whole audience and stuff.
Deity protocols.
Right, right. I said, oh, this is just a direct connection. So I really have appreciated that and really embraced that, and that's really helped with my meditative process.
I love, here's the other great part about all of this with you is your openness in embracing all of who you are, all of the journey. You're not hiding it. It's just who you are, and you're embracing it, and have brought it in everything into balance. So you're actually taking this holistic approach to life, a true holistic approach to life. So you're not like in the closet over here, you're like hiding out,
Right.
but you bring it all to the table. I love
Right.
that. That's what's supposed to happen.
Well, I haven't seen how to do it differently. I would say as a doctor, you pay a price,
Hmm.
because you're not going to be understood by other physicians. I mean, my practice is just different. So, you have
Yeah,
to,
it is.
so it
Thank
depends on,
goodness there's hope. Thank goodness there is absolute hope. Now, okay, so I want to ask you now. You've talked about all of this, and obviously when you did your thesis, this was back in like 1980 or so, when
right.
so that was huge. And you're talking about acupuncture and all these things. That was huge. But in terms of your younger years, were you always a questioning child or a curious child? I mean, like myself and some of the other
No,
folks, were
no,
you?
I was more of a nerdy kid that might be beaten up upon. I,
Don't
I
feel bad.
was
I was a nerd too. I
no,
just had
I
pigtails.
was into my books, but I remember things stood out. For instance, I remember there was a Newsday article. That's a paper that's local to Long Island. I was probably in middle school, and it talked about this guy that had meditated, and he was found, dead in a meditation position, right? Like after the weekend, he just left, and I found that
I'm out of here.
fascinating. I found that fascinating. Like, where did he go? And then there were science fiction books. I forgot this one particular author where people would go to Jupiter and they would put in this Jupiterian body to deal with that environment. And
Mhm,
they didn't want to come back into human form. And I'm like, oh, these are really interesting.
mhm,
And of course, there's oh wow, what's the black science fiction writer? Octavia Butler,
mhm,
and I
mhm,
just love some of her stuff. So here I am in medical school, and I remember making rounds on a patient, and the patient told me, he said, "Look, I'm going to die today." I'm like, "Okay."
like, okay.
So I called in the resident, everybody checked him out, and he was fine. And then later in the day, I came back to his bedside and he looked at me, right? Like he just looked at me. He says, "I'm going, going, gone." And that man left. He left. It was like the code, everything was blaring, the alarm, and I just stood to the side. I'm like, what's going on? know? So that registered, I started reading Carlos Castaneda. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had a great memory. So medical school was just really memorization. So it did not occupy all of my mind space because
Mm-hmm.
I had a great memory. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading Carlos Castaneda and I remember reading Journey to Ixtlan and I'm looking at hearing about all these other dimensions and things that I'm like, this is fascinating and stuff. So I realized that that was really more of my approach to health and medicine. It's like, how do I bring all of these things together? Um, so I just, I,
Curiosity was sparked then, is what
well,
it
more
sounds
than
like. You were
curiosity, my
more
God.
more than curiosity. You were ready to take that journey to, once you start down that rabbit hole, though, there really is no turning back. The more you begin to discover, we're listening to the vastness of his exploration over the years, in bridging all of that with Western medicine. And in a way, when you really look at it, when you think about it, the fact that we have to even fragment everything in that manner, it's like it's a holistic approach that has to be taken from consciousness, from the mind, the body. It all has to be, as opposed to these pieces. And that's what you did. You just started to see the whole picture, and just started diving in. And so, I think everybody, we can all just, take a cue from that, for those people who maybe are still a little bit narrow, still a little bit in the box. The reality is such a vast picture. This is the thing. It's so big, it's so vast. How do you put it in a little box? Well, you can. It's an illusion, the box that you've got anyway. But so anyway, so anyway, all right. So you've shared with us then that aspect of how you began to kind of dive in. What was it like, the truly the first experience of a more metaphysical experience? Then you talked about the trance, but your first time really feeling this. I mean, because I've been through that, where it was like a child in a candy store, where all of a sudden in a meditation I'm like, whoa, I'm like way beyond this physical experience. What was that like?
Well, I had different things that had happened in medical school. Just, something simple like asking that my clock stopped at night. And, because I wanted to see how that unfolds. And that's actually the case. But I think one of the clearest experiences for me was I conduct meditations using rose quartz as an anchor,
Mm,
because rose quartz deals with the idea of unconditional love. So one time in doing the meditation, I kind of opened my eyes and I was inside the rose quartz, right?
mm,
And I'm like, I closed my eyes again, and I opened them, and I was still inside of it. I'm like, holy crap, this is actually happening here, right? And what's happened is that, you know, I do something called applied kinesiology.
mhm,
And applied kinesiology starts off, Dr. George Goodhart, a third generation chiropractor, very structural in approach, right? But at least as a system that linked acupuncture meridians and a lot of other things that were in it in terms of testing. And then there was something where you could test different substances to see if they were helpful. So people would have vials and things that they would hold. And then at a certain point, I realized when I had thought there was one particular vial that they were holding and it was actually something else. And I realized, you know what? I don't really need the vial.
mhm,
I can just test that way. And I mean, this is over, of course, I've had a long medical career. So this is over many years it started to unfold. So I realized I can literally, I will touch points on a person's body, and if there's something that's out of balance or even off their body, a strong muscle will go weak. And then I can visualize or just see a particular substance and actually give it to them, and then it'll actually change. I could see how it would change. And, so you do this over and over. And then one day it occurred to me that, well, why don't you just, if you can do that, why don't you just zap them so that they get better and they leave? I said, that, you know, took me a while to get to that. So,
Sounds like Bewitched, the TV
right,
show.
right. So, so that didn't quite work out the way I thought it might. I tried that and it was nothing. It was like that. Oh, you hear someone gets a chiropractic adjustment, they go out and, they trip on the curb and, they're back to the same spot. So then I said, you know what? I need something that will carry this energy. Right. And that's when I came up with the rose quartz.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I will give a person a rose quartz and I can show them all the points that are out of balance. If they hold the rose quartz, it will correct it. So I would send people out with rose quartz. And so a couple things happened. One, a patient came back who had really bad colitis and he would have to go to the bathroom. Like it would take him 3 hours to get out the house in the morning. And he came back. He said, "You know what? I can get out in a half an hour now."
Mm,
I said, "Well, what did you do?" He says, "Well, when I hold the rose quartz, my body just relaxes." I
mm.
said, "Holy crap, this
Wow.
works." That was the first time that I've seen that. And that's been intermittent in terms of using that. And of course, I'm not just relying on that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people are paying me as a doctor not to do shamanic work necessarily, but they do want to get better. So I will add in different things at
Mm-hmm.
no cost. Here, take this. And
Combinations, right?
right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found that it serves as an anchor when we're doing
Mm-hmm.
meditation because it anchors in a field of love that's
Mm-hmm.
both protective and allows us to actually expand,
Mm-hmm.
within that, reality that we're creating and meditating together. So I've had an interesting relationship with rose quartz. And when I decided to use it, what was interesting, I had hesitated for 2 years
Mm.
before starting meditations at my office. And one day I looked up at the paintings that were in the office and I realized there were roses all over the
Oh,
office.
wow.
All over. I said, "Oh my
Mm.
goodness." So
Mm.
that kind of clenched it for me.
Yeah,
Like
message is
it's
right
right,
there.
it's been right here in my face. So that started that process with that. Right.
Oh my goodness. And the thing is, the idea of energy. There's been such a, I'm going to say a little bit, well, debate in the sense of most of Western medicine that have stayed away from that idea, which is so really amazing to me that they do that, because there's so much there that shows the electromagnetic quality of everything, of a human being's
But it's not
response.
it's not part of that cultural framework.
No, it's
I
not.
mean, Maxwell and Faraday did not really deal with, really laid that out not until the late 1800s. You go back to Asia and China, it's been there for thousands of years. People were
Hmm.
able to attune themselves to that energy. So that's a different environment.
Hmm.
Whatever was happening in the cultural environment of Europe did not lend itself to that. Of course, there are always individuals, even like Samuel Hahnemann with homeopathy, but people that were herbalists. But I mean, look, they're burning folks.
Right,
I just
exactly.
so
That's
it's like
yeah, witchcraft. Yeah,
right, right. So
yeah.
that's different.
That, I mean, but you absolutely look at, geez, the ignorance of human beings, and I'm not saying that really, even in a sense of, say, judgment or really mocking them, but you just look at how backwards we can be. And of course it depends on culture, and it depends on a lot of things, but in general, though, they were burning people because of things that they didn't understand, that was being said or done. And to some degree today, They might not burn people, but you will get tarnished. You will be get ridiculed or quackery or so there is. It's just the face has changed in the way that it's done.
I had worked with Melodoma Somé for a period of time. He's an African shaman. He wrote of water and spirit and some other things. Really fantastic. And
Mm,
part of dealing with that reality is that in that culture, people that were gay were considered gatekeepers, and
mm,
gatekeepers had a special metaphysical relationship to different elements in that society. And it was so interesting to see how they position, people with that kind of, gender
mm-hmm.
identification, in their society. And it was such a functional part. I said, this is really interesting,
It's very fascinating.
Right. So you see that there are other ways for people to organize societies and actually be in the world, and deal with forgiveness. I mean, we are constantly emphasizing drama, fear, guilt, shame, competition. I mean, and the problem is that at this point, that kind of energy, when you look at the environment and what's happening, loss of species, climate change, all of that is creating a reality that's going to
Hmm.
end up really destroying human society at this point.
We
So
bring about the very thing we fear, basically.
right,
Yeah,
right,
we run towards what we are attempting to run away from, and that's the age-old story. So yeah, so that's interesting what you said in terms of gatekeepers, because obviously it's energetic. So it's the energetic value associated with those people at that time, that where they categorized, they placed
right,
according to, and we're still doing that today. We just don't realize to what degree
right.
we do it or how we do it. There's an ignorance to that level of understanding.
But the West is going to have to look outside of itself. And to do that, and this was a problem I faced in medical school, there's a general arrogance. There's a general sense that science can solve everything or the intellect can solve
The
everything.
intellect.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's just not working. It's
Mm-hmm.
not working.
Yeah, yeah. It you said that right correctly, because it's more the intellect, as opposed to just the blanket idea of science, because science for most people is in this smaller box, but yet creation exists on some high level science that is way
Right.
beyond any description we could
Any
give.
intellectual understanding.
Exactly. You
Right.
can't. What I found is the best way to even attempt to understand any of that is when you're silent. It is so undescribable that there you all you can do is just be silent. The understanding, you get a little piece of the understanding through the silence. There's no words to describe any of it. So I
Wow.
find it exciting, and profound, and maybe more of that is happening at this time if we can recognize the opportunity. So let's talk a bit about now, because I see that there are opportunities here at this time, regardless of everything that's going on, opportunities for individuals to expand, to step into deeper aspects of themselves.
Right. Well, um, there has to be a certain level of openness to it, and I think there have been practitioners that are in the frontier of mining other cultural technologies like Joe Dispenza, and
Mhm.
been applying that, in different ways. Um, I think depending on who the person is, they bring their own unique way of looking at it and shaping that. Um, and what's interesting, some of it really has to do with resources, right? Is access to resources, access to just to have the time to actually create stuff, right? And I
Mhm.
find that that's been one of my issues in
Mhm.
terms of having a bicoastal practice and some of the more metaphysical work I would like to do. So I have teamed up with other practitioners that what I call work in the field, you know.
Hmm.
And in working in the field, we've done everything from past life regression to healing at a distance, pranic healing, Reiki, all of those kind of named disciplines. And I feel, just to give you an example of an application, you know, here we are at war with this virus, right? Trying to destroy an aspect of nature and doing it in a way that's kind of like stupid
Hmm. Yeah,
because
kind of.
um,
Hmm.
because one, it is really driven by profit, you know, in terms of the kind of therapy that we want to emphasize, not really driven by a larger science to understand that as it is, our bodies are not just human cells. They're composed of viruses and bacteria. And any of these viruses, when you have an epidemic or pandemic, the virus comes, it satiates itself, and then it has to blend with the host because it wants to live as well. So
Everything wants to live.
so
Everything wants to
my thought
experience life.
was we need to have some kind of ritual process
Hmm.
around actually looking at what's going on and coming and making peace at that energetic level, at that metaphysical level, you know, because this whole that viral the viral genome or whatever has been so disturbed by the manipulation that's been done. So while the technology is there and people clap themselves on the back because they can insert and mix these viruses, they don't know what the hell they're doing in terms of the larger impact that it's going to create. So many scientists feel right now by continuing introducing these different vaccines, you're putting pressure on this virus to keep mutating, to keep finding new ways to survive, new ways to, you know, affect other, affect other people and remain. So, you know, and you're ignoring the actual innate immune system, which, to be frank, that's what works most of the time. So you will poo poo nutrients, right? Anything else that's been shown to help this virus, somehow it's there's not enough evidence, or we've done these studies and it doesn't work. But yet, when you look at the world evidence, you look at, for instance, ivermectin, wherever it shows up, India, Peru, Mexico, Slovakia. You know, as soon as you put ivermectin in the population, that death rate goes down. That's not cause and effect, but it's an association. It's an association that can't be ignored. And yet we're told well, there's not sound clinical proof. In the meantime, you can talk about like remdesivir and some of these other drugs that, I mean, really? Is this the best that we can do? And it's the best within the Western cultural technology framework, which has also been tied to a whole material piece in terms of wealth, in terms of money. And it's not necessarily about healing, you know, it's about something else. And none of that boosted every year is going to change the reality that human beings are sinking into with more
Hmm.
fear, more desperation, more environmental toxicity, increasing cancer rates, climate change. That can't be addressed by this intellect alone, you
Hmm.
know. So that is an issue.
Absolutely. You said more than a mouthful there. That was absolutely necessary. I think one of the things that folks also, most people probably aren't aware of is that variants are absolutely, it's a natural process. It's something that happens typically, from what I'm understanding, with viruses. So it's not unusual that that
Yeah,
variants
we're
come
just
about.
hyper focused on it right now, but that
Exactly.
always happens. This virus can mutate every 8 hours. There were articles last year showing that it can mutate within a single individual, of course. So we're giving it ample opportunity.
Right,
Right.
exactly. The more at war, which is what you said, the more at war we are with it, because everything is its own unique being essence, life form, life force, and you look at human beings and how we will scratch to survive. Well, so is everything else. Everything
Right.
else is fighting to survive because the body's what? It's like its own unique universe, its own
Right.
unique world with all kinds of organisms living in this environment. So now it's being attacked. So it's fighting back the way that it needs to continue its life expanding and anyway,
Exactly.
it's really interesting. and,
Right.
and these are things that we need to hear because mainstream media has such a vast platform. They have the ears of so many people. To hear these things explained, it would change so much. It would reduce the energy of fear, right? Because right now we've got this blanket of fear, which is what you're saying. It would reduce that vast frequency of fear that is just radiating all over the place. And people could get a chance to what? To maybe more connect with themselves, would you say? More, just come back to center a bit more.
Exactly, because you don't make good decisions when your field is constricted. Your awareness is constricted. You're limited. Your intellect then becomes limited because the energetic being that you're embracing is just one of pure survival. So you don't expand to your heart level. You don't expand to other higher centers to inform you. You're just stuck in that first chakra. And, what can I
And
say?
it's stressful. Yeah, it's a stressful place. Now, if somebody wants to connect with you, I hope I can.
Wait, what you say?
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
was just going to ask you if somebody wanted to connect with you, how could they do that? And
Sure.
anything else that you wanted to add? Any final thoughts or any of that?
Okay. So yeah, I would say at this juncture, I think people we just need to wake up. We need to wake up. One of the reasons I started meditation groups with my clients is because I realized unless consciousness of individuals moves to a heart level, can expand into a heart level, that this wave of humanity is really doomed. Because without that expanded awareness, so that you can see that the same life energy that flows through you is flowing through other people and is flowing through the whole earth and everything. It is not like you constantly trying to kill things for profit, for dominance, to get control over things. All of these kind of negative expressions of lower chakra kind of consciousness. But we need the heart and the minds of more people to be geared toward being better versions of themselves. No matter who you are, where you are, you just want to be a better version of yourself. And that embracing of that beingness will actually begin to shift the energy. So that's not a mental or intellectual thing. It can assist, but it's actually doing that work, and you'll be amazed to see all the stuff that pops up within your own life and character that you need to change and release in order to be a better version of yourself. So, in terms of reaching out to me, I am here in Santa Monica, healinghealthservices.com, healinghealthservices.com, 310-966-9194, 310-966-9194. And I look forward to, helping people.
Sounds great. Now, one more quick question that just came to me, but in terms of health, we've talked about so many things, but what other suggestion do you have for people to say, I mean, drink water? I'm just being ridiculous, but things that they could actually also do to support the body, to support the immune system, basic things that they might not be doing.
Well, part of it really, it still has to come to, there has to be some kind of daily reset.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you do that in the morning, the end of the day, because most of what is happening is stuff that we're doing to harm ourselves. The junk that we eat, the junk that we consume mentally and emotionally, the stuff that's projected as entertainment, right? I mean, you have to be able to release some of this to actually make room, right? To make room, to be quiet enough to receive and understand what part you have to play in the unfoldment of consciousness. Consciousness is always unfolding and expanding. I mean, do you want to participate in that? Or do you want to just be like a bug in a rug that know, you, you gotta be recycled pretty quickly. I don't know how else to say it, but
No, that's true though.
let's play the game. Let's play.
That's right. That's right. Well, we are definitely at the end of the show, and this has been a wonderful conversation with you. So much that you shared, and I am looking forward to chatting with you again.
Same here.
I had the opportunity to be on your show as well, which was really wonderful. So, if anybody has the opportunity to listen to that, that would be wonderful. It's on WBAI. They should be able to find it on the website, correct? All right, everybody. I thank you so much. Thank you once again, Doc, for being on the show. And to my listening audience, thank you as always for your support. And do visit the archive, theexpansionzone.com. All these shows, all past shows are there. There are some videos, two videotaped interviews that are also there. And do subscribe to our YouTube channel and Instagram and all of those things. And as always, I like to remind you to live life to its fullest and question everything. Until next time, see you then.